Dolphins fans, what is going on? It is Ben Morgan of the Fins Up Network here for the final preview and prediction video. Our Miami Dolphins, Week 13 against the Washington Commanders Sunday. This is crazy part too. Sunday, 1 o'clock game on the road. We have one more road game left after this. And Week 17, I believe it is, we travel to Baltimore. But other than that, every game, remainder of the season, will be at home. So we got this one on the road. Home up until Week 17, road game, home to finish things out against the Buffalo Bills. But we're going to dive into this one a little bit more. If you missed this week's first preview video, go back, check that one out. We talked top matchups, keys to victory. Today, we're going to talk about some of the latest injury news, team news. We got some viewer questions that were submitted. We're going to tackle as many of those as possible. Before we dive in, though, got to hear from you. What are your final score predictions? What are you thinking for this Dolphins Week 13 matchup against the Commanders? Go ahead, drop your thoughts, predictions, everything in the comments. Let's get things going right away, though. We talked about the injury report. As always, full injury report will be going on the scroll along with some other news, the line on the game, everything that you can read right there on your own, some stats. Full injury report is right there. Now, we got good news, we got bad news. We'll start with the good news, which is getting a little bit healthy, getting a little bit healthier up front and some playmakers as well. Sounds like Terron Armstead and Robert Hunt should be good to go. Also sounds like De'Von Achane will be back. Now, Terron Armstead, he making it sound like he's going to be able to go. If he cannot, Kendall Lamb, who has also battled some injuries, would be a potential option. If neither of them can go, it would be Keon Smith at left tackle. We saw him briefly in that game against the Jets also last week, but it sounds like all three of those guys are going to be back. De'Von Achane, like we talked about, got that knee kind of unfortunately landed on in that game against the Raiders, ended up missing that game against the Jets, kind of more almost precautionary than anything, but nice to have him back, yet more speed on the field for this offense. Looking forward to this one. We talked a lot in the preview video where it's like, there's a good chance to get, I don't want to say even get right in this game, but if we've been having some turnovers and we're looking for that blow-up game once again where the bunch of points, bunch of yards, this is the game. We talked more about that in that last preview video, like I said. Go back and check that one out if you haven't seen it yet. But I mentioned that there was some bad news, and as you can see by the header right there, caution with Holland, there's a good possibility that we play this game against, what is Sam Howell? Does he lead the NFL in passing yards? He's first or second right now. Washington throws the ball. They throw it a lot. Now, it hasn't necessarily equated to wins. However, they love throwing the damn football. We're going to see a lot of it, and we might be without Javon Holland in this one. He actually injured both of his knees. I think it was on that one tackle that he had later in the game against the Jets last on Black Friday. He is listed as questionable. He did get a limited practice session in on Wednesday, but he was held out of Wednesday and Thursday's practice. But just like what we saw with De'Von Achane last week and what we've seen numerous times throughout this season, McDaniel, the coaching staff, we're playing it safe with guys. We literally this year, we've got an 8-3 record, which is great, but we've got the long game in mind. And anytime there's a guy that's like, give him an extra week, let him get healthy, more often than not, the team has done that. I think the one guy we've kind of rushed back was Connor Williams. We rushed him back. He kind of got dinged back up again, and he ended up having to miss another game. So I think they're kind of learning their lessons on this. They're being more safe than anything. So if Holland doesn't play, look for a lot of Deshaun Elliott, look for a lot of Brandon Jones in at safety to kind of fill those holes. Let's get into some viewer questions. Got some good ones this week. This one, actually, Zach Ertz, a couple people talked about Zach Ertz, both Joseph and Dan there. Thoughts on signings, Zach Ertz, would he be a good fit in this offense? Quite honestly, if we go back to the offseason, in one of the videos we did, we talked about how there was actually some thoughts internally that, you know what, Cardinals really weren't going anywhere. They were potentially looking to trade him, and Dolphins were kind of interested. Now, obviously, they didn't make a move. They didn't make a move before the trade deadline. He did get released. I'm recording this Friday night. He did clear waivers, so he is free to sign wherever he wants. Team doesn't need to take on the contract that he had while he was with the Cardinals. With that said, dove into it a little bit more. There's a little bit of interest on the Dolphins end, but at the end of the day, they're still happy with what they've got. No, Durham Smythe is a little bit dinged up, but they're happy with guys like Julian Hill. The people that have filled in, they're fine with. I don't know if they necessarily want to mess with things that are going on in team chemistry right now. So while there is some interest, we're not going to rule it out. I would say it's probably less likely that a guy like Zach Ertz ends up signing with the Dolphins. And I think one of the people asked me as well, I think it was Dan, had asked, like, do you like the fit there? And yeah, I think we would benefit by having a do-it-all tight end, and a tight end that can be seen as more of a pass catcher. But quite honestly, I mean, we went all of last year without featuring a tight end. We went through, what, 11 games this year really without featuring a tight end. It's like, are we going to start now? Are we going to do that right now? And I think Dan even said it in his question, his comment was like, if we're going to do that, let's just draft our own. Let's get our own guy in here. And I actually kind of feel more so on that wavelength. So yeah, Zach Ertz, he's probably going to end up somewhere. I think I heard maybe reuniting with the Eagles, Dallas Goedert being out. We'll see what happens. I would say there's probably a very small chance that he ends up with the Dolphins. Let's go into Benjamin's question. How do the Dolphins take advantage of the Commanders no longer having Montez Sweat and Chase Young? Quite honestly, when the trade deadline was happening, I was like, you know what? We're going to play the Commanders yet this year. Sweat's pretty damn good. I loved Chase Young coming out of Ohio State. He's battled his injuries as well, but man, when he's healthy, he's a pretty damn good pass rusher. It's like if these guys were to make some moves on the deadline, I'd love to see them be sellers, get those guys out of the way before they have to play the Dolphins. And boom, we got our wish. And that's great and everything. Now, the Washington is pretty good interior. What is it? Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, both of those guys are pretty good from the interior. So if we can focus more of the attention on those guys and not necessarily have to worry about a Sweat and a Chase Young, Tua gets rid of the ball quick anyways. So it's not like we're probably going to change too much of the game plan. But knowing that you're not going to have Sweat and Young being the ones that come after you, you're probably a little bit more comfortable if you need to take that extra half second, make that next read, look for that progression to happen, wait for a receiver to come a little bit more open. You don't have to worry about that quite as much when you don't have those two guys tearing around the edge. So I think they'll take plenty of advantage of it in the same ways that we had just kind of talked about there. Next one here, Alejandro. This was kind of I merged a couple because they both kind of asked about Claypool and Chris Brooks. Gregory on there as well. If Chris Brooks gets activated, do you think the Dolphins will use him at running back in the short yardage situations, and then any Chase Claypool updates? Let's start with Chris Brooks. It's interesting with the Dolphins because you're allowed to take 8 players that have been IR and bring them back to your active roster. And I believe we're at 7 right now. So as of recording this, Chris Brooks has not been elevated back to the team's active roster. Now, if he does get activated, is there a role potentially for him in those short yardage situations? I would say sure. But at the same time, look at the running back room though now. We've got Mostert, who second in the NFL in rushing yards at 31 years old. He's got a damn good chance of breaking Ricky Williams' team record for most rushing touchdowns in a season. So, yeah, he's not getting off the field too much. We just talked about Achane coming back. And no, he's not the short yardage guy. But also remember that Jeff Wilson is back as well. And he's not getting a prominent role. He had a nice game against the Jets. He's going to get work back in there as well. I know he's angry. He's ready to get going as well. So I almost see Jeff Wilson kind of as that short yardage back. The thing about Chris Brooks as well, and maybe why there'd be, I don't want to say hesitancy to bring him back from IR and use one of those spots, but at the same time, it's like, how many running backs are you going to have active on game day? So if you bring him back, there's a good chance that maybe he's a healthy game day scratch as well. So there's a lot of situations there. Would he help in those situations? Yeah, couldn't get much worse. But as we get a Robert Hunt back and a Terron Armstead back, and we'll have to see how things go with Lester Cotton and Robert Jones and Isaiah Wynn, all the guys in the interior that we're missing as well. Maybe we will try to run up the middle a little bit more on those 3rd and 4th and 1 situations moving forward. And then moving on to Chase Claypool. Quite honestly, right now, he had that little cleanup procedure, it sounds like, on his knee. More so than anything, the Dolphins just want to get him healthy for when he is able to really be able to contribute. We haven't seen much so far. He's gotten very limited reps, but when he has, he's taken advantage of those. The team thinks that he can really add something to this passing game. And in my opinion, it's like one of those situations where when Tyreek and Waddle come off the field and you're like, we're really, I don't want to say lacking playmakers, but the defense is like, okay, we can load the box a little bit more. We're dealing with Cedric Wilson and River Craycraft and those kind of Braxton Berrios. It's not the guys that are necessarily going to take the top off the defense. Well, you take Hill and Waddle out and you can put in a guy like Chase Claypool. Well, that changes things a little bit because he is a big body guy, but he still has the speed. He is fast to bring that element to the offense. So you kind of got to like him in that situation as well. But he did get in a little bit of practice work this week, so I think he's getting a little bit closer. We'll have to see how things kind of play out with him, though. Let's do one more. Chris, right here, I like this question. If you could magically fill in one position with a top player heading into the playoffs, what position would you pick? I kind of like tight end, but just like I talked about earlier with Ertz, it's like, well, are we going to feature? Do we have the plays right now that feature a tight end? So I'm like, I feel like I'd be kind of wasting it right there. And then my head kind of went to linebacker. It's like, we could use a do-it-all linebacker, a guy that could be used more in coverage as well. And I look at David Long, and he's done really damn well. He's kind of been an underrated signing so far this year. Jerome Baker has had his moments, but he kind of bounced back real nice there with some plays against the Jets. So I'm like, I don't know if I want to waste my magic spot with a linebacker as well. So it's like, you know what? We're getting a little bit healthier online, but if you could give me like a top tier guard, tackle, whatever you want to give me, especially with the injury issues we've had up front, just give me a lineman. Just give me that top tier magical offensive lineman. Let's keep Tua healthy. Let's give him as much time as possible in the pocket as possible, because man, you're going to give him extra time with the receivers that we have. It's already good luck defense the way it is. It'd be a defensive coordinator's worst nightmare. Let's put it that way. Let's go into my prediction. I've got us doing it again, Dolphins fans. There's not a doubt in my mind in this one. I will be very, very unpleasant. I will be very unsatisfied in the recap video if we don't win this game. And quite honestly, I think we're going to win by a decent margin. And it's funny, if you look at like Vegas point spreads the last few weeks, the Dolphins have either been the biggest favorite every week or at least like a top 2 or 3. And I know that has a lot to do with our opponent as well. But when you're favored by what, 9 or 10 points, whatever the line is that was on the scroll, on the road in December, you're doing something right, and you're probably playing a team that's maybe not doing as many of those things right. So yeah, keep Tua healthy, give him that time, expose this passing defense. They've been exposed all season. Keep that up. Like I talked about in that preview video, 300, 350 yards, 3 or 4 touchdowns for Tua. Let's get both Waddle and Hill over that century mark. Keep Raheem Mostert going. Our offense should get back to just clicking in this game. That's what I want to see. I want to see back to those games where, what do we have, like 1 or 2 punts in some of those games? I just watched the Thursday night game where there wasn't even a single punt. Let's do something like that. Let's win this thing in convincing fashion. Like I said, just 2 road games left all year. Put your stamp on this one. The Bills are off. They're not gaining any ground. The only thing that can happen division-wise is us losing and letting them kind of seep back in and giving them hope. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that against an inferior team. Take care of business. Do it in a convincing fashion too. Win by 20 plus. That is what I've got. But like I said, I want to hear from you, your final score predictions. Go ahead, drop those in the comments. Like I said, I'll be back after the game at some point with our recap video. But until that one, Dolphins fans, fins up.